the doubt about my capacity to speak English, there wasn't any. They were like, "You're American." There was no question like, "Was it your first language?" Or like, "No, you're American." And that's it. So it's interesting because like in States, there's questioning around whether I'm American or not right now because I'm a daughter of immigrants. But in France, I show my, I say I'm American and they're like, "Yeah, sure. Your accent, you sound American." Like, duh. There's no doubt. Like as soon as you leave, you're American, but you're in the States, you're like, question mark, you know? So it was weird. It was very strange because I was suddenly aware of the passport privilege that my parents gave me that I didn't have in America, if that makes sense. Like I became more privileged by leaving than being in the States speaking two languages, which is nuts. Nuts. I've learned to define myself the way I feel rather than have other people define me, which, that comes with experience and age and years of, being the outsider. And being like, you know what? No, I don't care. I speak French the way I speak French. Like, I'm going to throw in English words. I'm going to throw in Spanish words. My Spanish is Franglish. It's Franiol. So it's whatever, just accept that I'm multicultural. That's it. It took me a long time and I can totally get how, it took me like a decade of living here. So it doesn't come easy.
If you ask my guest today who she is, she won't start with her resume. She'll start with her roots. Lori Martinez is a self-described Colombian Franco-American who grew up in Queens and made her life in Paris. For the last 6 years, she led the creation of Studio 80, an award-winning multilingual podcast company that produced content in over 20 languages. She recently decided to close the company, but as Lori says, Colombianos no se varan. Colombians always find a way. After closing the chapter in 80 last fall, she's taking everything that she learned as a CEO and journalist to launch her next venture, Maravilla. It's a startup dedicated to planting seeds for other immigrants and multicultural entrepreneurs, helping them grow their own global brands. In this episode, we talk about the immigrant hustle, raising a child in your second or third language, and why she chosen to create a job for herself on her own terms. She's a storyteller, a mother, and an amazing entrepreneur. I learned a lot from her, and she's truly inspiring to listen to. Here's Lori Martinez. Lori, gracias. So nice to see you. How are you?
Good. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. My baby's almost 2, so I'm just running around all the time. Okay.
Thank you for being here. I know, and I appreciate your time. And I'm excited to dig in a little bit more about you so our audience get to know your incredible work. How would you describe yourself for people that don't know you, Lori?
I am Colombian-American, born to Colombian immigrant parents in New York City. I grew up in Queens, and I moved to France 10 years ago to do a master's and then stayed. So now I'm currently actually in the process of becoming French. So I guess I could say I'm going to be Colombian Franco-American. And I guess if you want to, go into my work side, yeah, I'm best known for Studio 80, which is a multilingual production company that I started in 2019, that I did wonderful things with, making multicultural podcasts in many languages, worked with a lot of incredible people over 6 years. And last fall, I closed it. So that adventure has closed. The chapter has ended. And I'm starting something new. So I guess I answered this question in the way that the Europeans do, which is not what do you do, but who you are first. So that's why I said, where am I from first? I think that identifies me more right now.
That's what we were looking for. I want to go deeper into Studio 80 and what are you going to do next. I wanna kick off with one question. Like, what's one belief from your culture that has helped you in your life and that you still apply today?
Colombiano No Se Vara. So basically, it's very Colombian to be like, no, there's always a solution. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean that you can't do a thing? No, of course there's a way to do it. There's a workaround. There's another way to do that. And any time in my career that I've had like a struggle or, when I first got here, I was a student and I had trouble finding a job right away because I needed to get sponsored and everything. It was like a rough patch for me as an immigrant because I'm double immigrant, right? So my parents immigrated, then I immigrated. So anytime I had any moment like that, my mom would always say like, you're Colombian, you can't fail. Like you have to, like, you ever seen it's I guess, like, culturally, we have this thing of, like, there's always a job, like, there's always something that you can do, so, like, don't give up. Don't think that just because it doesn't work in one direction, it won't work in another, is basically the thing. Um,
Yeah. Do you think that's Colombian and American or more from Latin America?
I think a lot of people who are from, like, another culture and they come to a new country, like, they have no choice but to succeed. Like, what do you mean? I came here to
Yeah,
succeed. Like, I have to. There's no option. I can't fail. What do you mean? I'm gonna go
exactly.
home? I can't go home.
Right.
And a
Yeah.
lot of the time you can't. Like, really, there's no home to go back to sometimes for different, reasons. Not my personal experience, but like there are people who can't go home. So like there's no choice but to go up. And so I think that's immigrant mentality and also Latino mentality. But sorry.
Absolutely. I agree. A mix of both. I want to talk about a little bit of growing up in New York. And how do you remember that childhood? And when did you first hear from your parents of how they immigrated to the States?
Man. So I guess the first answer is I grew up in Queens, which is a very international neighborhood borough of New York City. So everyone I grew up with was from somewhere else, or their parents were from somewhere else. So very immigrant community. I grew up in Jackson Heights, which is known as the world, like little Colombia and also Little India. Because like 2 streets over, there's like the Indian community, but there's also like a Colombian street of like all Colombian businesses. So yeah, it's just super diverse. Honestly, the multicultural thing, I grew up with it. I never really thought about it actively, which is really interesting because for me, because you grew up in a diverse place, like you automatically think it's normal that everyone is from somewhere else. So you're very open to every culture. You're very like, oh, that's normal. And one of my best friends was Polish. Another one was Egyptian. Another one was, and then they would go to
Hmm.
like Polish school after school, or Chinese school, or Korean language school, and it'd be like, oh yeah, it's just so I can continue having my culture. They would volunteer. And each of us had this like double thing. So it was like, oh, I didn't think I was special, honestly. And then I went to college and I realized, oh, wow, yeah, not everybody has this experience, because I went to school in upstate New York and I became the minority for the first time. Because when you grow up in Queens, like you go to a public school, I went to one of the public high school, and everyone was from somewhere else. And then I went to public university in upstate New York, and I was like, maybe one of 2 people who are POC in the classroom. You go from being the majority to being the minority. It's a weird experience. Like, it really struck me. And I also started to like think about, okay, so if this is not the case everywhere, then what is the experience? And so I got to more identifying with my Latinidad in that way, because for me, before that, I was just Colombian-American. Like, I'm Colombian at home. That's it. But the discourse around being like Latina, Latinx, and all these things, that was very much in the late 2010s, like that in my childhood we didn't have that conversation. It was just the reality. But then we became very like good at like associating labels, like, okay, now we're not just Colombian-American, we're like Latinos everywhere. Like, and that, like, I guess amalgam of all the communities together, that made me kind of want to know more about my identity, want to know more about my immigration story, my family's immigration story. So yeah, I started slowly interviewing my family, but like in a very informal way. Like, I didn't think it was going to become a thing. I also had these conversations in a slow way, like over several years. One time when I went back, I had already moved to France and I was having these struggles as an immigrant here. I went back for my brother's graduation from from college, and during the 6-hour drive between New York City and my brother's university, I like asked my dad how he came to America.
Yeah.
And I had never asked him before. I was like, I'm just so curious. Like, can you just tell me for once? And we had such a long route that like he told me everything. And that was like when I decided, okay, yeah, maybe I can write this down or do something with it. And that's when I did my first ever podcast, like Mija podcast, which I did, which was the kind of documentary novella version of my family's immigration journey, where like each member of the family's story is told in like a novella type way. And that was fun. It was a cool project. Honestly, like getting to know your roots, like if you have living family members who can still talk about that journey, it's very inspiring to know, and to know where you came from. It changed a lot about my perspective on my own experience too, and checked my privilege a lot.
Yeah.
Especially like my mom didn't know English. I came here, I spoke French already, like it's not the same. It's not the same experience, So the privileges that I gained because of them, I'm very aware of them because I know how they lived.
Right. And you slowly realize that it was not, with life and with your own immigration story.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when your dad told you about the full story of how he immigrated?
Can't even remember. I don't know how old I was. Oh my god, maybe 23, 24. I want to say so late, late. I knew my mom's vaguely because like it had come up in like a class assignment at one point. You know, sometimes they ask you to do your like family story or whatever. So I knew it vaguely, but like I hadn't like asked so much in detail. And my dad definitely, I never had that conversation with him. So it was very cool to like, okay, but you know, how was it? Because I remember at one point he would tell me stories about his first jobs, that he was a mechanic and then he was trying to save up for an apartment. And at one point, like during 1 year, full year, this is why he can't eat pizza anymore. Because 1 year he ate pizza every
Hmm.
day because it was $1. That's all he ate. He ate a slice of pizza for every single day for a year. And now he can never like, it disgusts him, pizza. It's been like 40 years. And like he's like,
Which is
I can't.
understandable.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
And at home, you speak with your family, you
Spanish.
speak Spanish, English, or Spanish?
Spanish,
Yes,
Spanish. In fact,
from
Spanish
Latin
was my
America.
first language. Yeah. My mom spoke to me in Spanish at home, and it was my first language up until I was 3. I only spoke Spanish and then went to school, spoke English. And my brother has a different kind of bilingualism too, because my mom spoke better English when he was born. So she spoke to him in both, and he replied in English. So my Spanish is better than my brother's Spanish, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And you said that in school, you try to learn Spanish from Spain.
Yeah, so I had this experience in I think it was grade school. We had the option of taking Spanish class, and I had to take Spanish, and then eventually got really frustrated because I would make mistakes that weren't really mistakes. They were like Spain Spanish versus Latino Spanish, and it was frustrating for me. So eventually I just decided to take French as soon as I like had the opportunity to do another language because I didn't want to. You're not going to teach me how to speak my own language is the kind of thing that I was
Right.
feeling
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't believe they teach Spanish from Spain.
It doesn't make sense.
Still,
It's
yeah.
because La Real Academia del Español is the one that sets the rules. And so that, you know, it's also strange that,
Right.
for example, when you learn French in North America, learning French in the US, you don't learn Canadian French, even though it's like right next door. More people are likely to learn standard French because that's where
Yes.
the rules are coming from, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And why French? Why did you decide it? You were just curious about the language.
I was curious. I liked some French movies. I had watched this movie called Sabrina that I really liked. That was about this young girl, yeah, who goes and she's like a housemaid, daughter of like the chauffeur. Like my dad's a cab driver, so I was like, oh, I can relate, girl. She goes to France and she like comes back. She's all
Yeah.
glamorous, and like I wanted to be like
Yeah.
Sabrina. I was like, I'm gonna go with my shabby clothes and come back in Givenchy.
Yeah.
You know, that did not happen, but a girl can dream, you know? I did end up becoming French, you know, like this way,
Yeah.
you know? So,
You have a
it's a
very
win.
Sabrina experience in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
At one point, or did you wanted to immigrate as a teen, as a child? Like, did you dream about that
I
constantly?
dreamt about it. Yeah. I'm one of those people that believes in manifestation because I really, when I was 15, I saw Sabrina and I saw a couple of other French movies because I was taking the French class, and I just became obsessed with French culture. And I like wrote in my journal, like, I'm going to move to Paris. I wrote that. And I was like 15. And
Oh, wow.
actually, I talked to a friend of mine from high school recently, and she was like, I remember you wrote that, and you actually live in France now. It's crazy. So yeah, no, I definitely, it was the path that I was going to go on regardless. I did at one point consider moving to Montreal because I had studied French and it was like either Montreal or Paris for a master's degree, but Paris called to me more.
Yeah, I can see why.
Yeah.
You did your master's in Paris in journalism, correct?
It was a master in communication. So there were journalistic elements. I had journalism classes, but it was mainly communication, strategy, branding. I really believe that I already had like a lot of journalism experience in the sense of working in radio before. So when I came here, it was more like, okay, but what happens when you make something and you want to promote it kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
To make
Yeah.
sure it gets heard. So I learned a lot about branding, and that really helped with my company. So when I created Ochenta, like I made it a strong brand mission. People really understood the purpose of the company. Like it wasn't just we make podcasts. It was like we make podcasts for people, you know, representation. It had all of my values integrated into all the storytelling that we did. So it was very cool to have learned how to do that and then like apply it to my company and like everything that we did.
Right. Did you want to be a journalist ever since you lived in the US? Was that your goal?
Yeah. Yeah, so my grandfather was an editor at El Tiempo in Colombia,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
grew up with him telling me stories about being a journalist and like traveling and all these things. So like we would go back to Bogota and he would tell me stories. And so like I kind of grew up with like that's a cool job in my mind. So as soon as I started working like professionally, like my first ever work experience was doing radio, like it was always storytelling in some way. So I joined the radio when I got to college. Then I did NPR internship and then worked freelance for a long time as a journalist, radio tape syncer, anything that you could find as a journalist. But I found that my Spanish wasn't helping me, which is interesting because at that time it was like I want to say 2015, 2014, 2013. At that point, there were very few media outlets that were like Latino first or Latino focused, and you kind of had to know somebody. And I didn't have any connections in the media world at all. So I really felt like, the only way for me to find success is to leave because my Spanish isn't helping me here. And I feel like, I don't have the right connections and my university connections aren't going to give me anything that, like, not the kind of international experience that I wanted. I really wanted to be able to say, like, I'm Christian, I'm on poor. Like, I wanted to be like international journalist, work for
Right.
CNN, that was the
Yep.
original dream,
Mm.
is to work for CNN. And then I saw this interview she did where she was like talking about how she had waited so long to have children and that she had like prioritized her career and like she's in her late 40s or something when she first had her first child and she doesn't regret it, but it kind of made me feel like, oh, I really don't want to be that. So I did like kind of I really wanted to, I didn't want to be the kind of careerist that climbed the ladder in a traditional way. So that was also in the back of my mind when I ended up kind of almost DIYing my job because I was freelance journalist, then created a podcasting career out of that. And in podcasting, you can't just like become the executive producer. Like you do climb the ladder, but in a studio, in a traditional studio model. But I didn't have a studio. Like I was just working for random studios and, freelancing for all these people. And then I had enough projects to start my own company. So I kind of like learned along the way and became
Yep.
CEO. And from there, it came all my experience, which is really interesting. But it also allowed me to kind of shape the way that I worked so that I wouldn't have to make that choice the way that Christian had to do with this kind of serious, careerist model, very American style of working. Like I was more French at that point.
Right. Right. How was the adaptation to France? Not only in your work, but how did you feel? You also mentioned that it was the first one of the first times that you felt like the outsider.
I mean, in the sense that I spoke French, but it wasn't good enough to be able to be like integrated into society in the right way that they like in France, if that makes sense. I feel like in the US, when you immigrate, like it's possible to get by on bad English, but in France, if you have bad French, you can't get by because it's kind of judgmental in the way that you they might as well just speak English is what ends up happening. So my French wasn't so good when I first got here. So I had trouble with like, yeah, finding work that wasn't English first, which was frustrating because the whole point was that I wanted to work in French, but I didn't get that
Yeah.
kind of work. I actually got more work as a native English speaker, which I wasn't necessarily native because, again, Spanish was my first language. So
Yeah.
everything is backwards. Everything. It's all about how you present yourself, to be honest, because like I actually had an interesting experience. And I think this is something that changed my entire perspective on like, I guess, privilege. Because in the US, when you're Latino, there's certain things that people assume about you, right?
Yeah.
I would go to conferences in the States and I would talk to someone and be like, I'm Colombian-American, and be like, oh, my nanny's Colombian. Like this is the kind of thing that you would have as a conversation, right? But when I would be in France, the conversation would be like, you're Colombian-American. What do you mean? Like you're two things? Because already it doesn't compute. You're American, probably. Like the doubt about my capacity to speak English, there wasn't any. They were like, you're American.
Yeah.
There was no question like, oh, was it your first language? Or like, no, you're American. And that's it. So it's interesting because like in States, there's questioning around whether I'm American or not right now because I'm a
Yes.
daughter of immigrants. But in France, I show my, I say I'm American. And they're like, yeah, sure. Your accent, like, you sound American. Like, duh.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. Like as soon as you leave, you're American. But you're in the States, you're like, question mark, So it was weird. It was very strange because I was suddenly aware of the passport privilege that my parents gave me that I didn't have in America, if that makes sense. Like I became more privileged by leaving than
Yes.
being in the States speaking two languages, which is nuts. Nuts.
Yeah. Yes. And what now do you feel like when you speak French? The French, actually.
No, I speak very good French. My husband sometimes says like, oh, it pains me when you speak sometimes, but it's a joke because I do speak good enough French to like have a conversation. I don't have that doubt anymore, but I've also kind of learned to define myself the way I feel rather than have other people define me, which, that comes with experience and age and years of, being the
Yeah.
outsider and being like, you know
Yeah.
what? No, I don't care. I speak French the way I speak French. Like, I'm going to throw in English words. I'm going to throw in Spanish words. My Spanish is Franglish. It's Franiol. So it's whatever, just accept that I'm multicultural. That's it.
Yeah. Yes. At some point, I think you're more comfortable with that as an immigrant and
It
stop
took me
caring
it took
more
me a
and more.
long time though. Yeah, it took me a long time and I can totally get how it took me like a decade of living here. So it doesn't come easy. And I understand my parents even more because they've been in the States for multiple decades. And so it's like they're more American than American. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Pero, yeah.
I want to talk about starting Studio Ochenta, and there's a lot of this that you have talked about on your Substack, and not only starting it, but actually maintaining the company. I'm curious on how did you how did you survive like at the beginning, because starting a company can be incredibly complicated, and navigating as an immigrant in a new country and all the
Mhm.
legal stuff that come with it.
Yeah.
How was that process in a way that for you that you felt like it was sustainable?
Yeah, no, I think it was also the Colombiano No Se Vara in the back of my head because there were periods where there were lulls before I even started Ochenta. Like I was a freelancer for 5 years before I started my company. So it was a long time
Hmm.
of me going in the ups and downs of like figuring out I was going to work for, what projects were going to come up, and just kind of always being constantly on, if that makes sense. Like always talking about my experiences online and saying like I went to this amazing thing, or when the Notre Dame was on fire, like I worked with ABC News and I talked about that, and like, as a fixer because I spoke French and English, and that was like I was just there. So I think I kind of knew that I had a very special talent, which was to be international and, kind of cross bridges. And being here for so many years, I think really helped. I think I had the confidence after 5 years of being freelance, of everyone kind of knowing who I was in the scene, to be like, you know what, I'm going to start my thing. If it fails, what am I going to do? I'm going to continue freelancing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it could just, and to begin with, actually, my company it became an incorporation like a year in. So I was still freelancing, but I had created the brand to start actually getting bigger projects and everything. And like, as soon as we hit the cutoff or whatever of earnings to be able to become an incorporation, which was like maybe 8 months in or something like that, that was when I was like a corporation and then like actually could start hiring people full time and everything. But it took a long time. Like Ochenta grew from a company of one to a company of six to a company of eight to a company of six to a company of four to a company of two, and
Yeah.
now the last year was a company of one. It grew, it goes up and down, and you just have to be able to adapt. But my thing was always prioritize the team spirit, always have, really real human conversations about the way that we work. I instilled a very French work policy with my team. I don't care about the hours you work as long as the work gets done.
Hmm.
We always have resting days. We don't work in the summer. I was very much and the new wave of millennial boss of like, just do your job. I don't mind.
Yeah.
Real life comes first, etc.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of trust. I had a really great team. Most of the people that started with Ochenta stayed until the end, which was incredible.
Hmm.
Up until the last year when I really reduced staff because we reduced projects because I also had a child, and so it was no longer the scale that we were producing before. But honestly, like we had a really good run on, and I have no regrets of everything we accomplished together. It was everything anyone could dream of. Like I wanted to do that,
Yeah.
I did it. But it came a moment where it was time to let go, and I'm very satisfied with that decision. You just have to, if you're in business in general, like just be aware that there's ups and downs and lulls, and just be prepared for them months in advance. Like I had a looking glass of like 6 to 8 months always to see like where things were going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Secured funding for the year, like, a year in advance usually. So there was a lot of pre-work, a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
pitching work, a lot of things that you do as a journalist too. You're pitching all the time. You don't know if they're going to accept it, but you do it all the time. And you get used to rejection, and you just keep going, keep going, keep going until you can't go anymore. And that's what happened to me. I couldn't go anymore.
You went for a long time.
Yeah,
For
it
a
was a
long,
long
long time.
time.
And I have never seen any other company like that. Honestly, I think the amount of translation work
Mm.
that you did, I'm just curious to ask you specifically about that, because Right now, of course, there's so much AI that you can translate the shows with, but to make them really authentic in another language, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think, the best part of it because I went into it again with the multicultural mindset that I'd always had, which is that, work with people who are from there, talk about the questions that might interest them, or do you think that will block? My favorite thing that I did was I had two projects that I really loved doing this, but Miha season 2 we did in Chinese with a Franco-Chinese story, and we had to translate it from French to English to Chinese. And so the woman that was doing the translation from French to Chinese, she was Francophone, but she also spoke English, so it was perfect. She was like the perfect translator for this because she understood the Franco-Chinese experience, but she also was able to communicate with me in French and English about the nuances. And so we spent hours like just talking about the way to present a certain thing, how culturally like this could be received, how we should change a detail, how we should do. I mean, it was such an interesting editorial work that we were doing. And it was just based on the question of openness of like, I know only as much as I know, and I'm here to learn. And that vibe just drew every project. Like it guided every single project and made it so that we could do things in like crazy language. I mean, crazy languages. By crazy, I mean in languages that are never represented, like Mongolian or Shona. Like these languages you never see translated ever. But like we worked with creators who were like, yeah, this is how you say it. And, we were talking openly about the questions of like translation all the time, all the time. It was so fun. It was so fun. But
Yeah.
today, this kind of work is largely replaced by AI. So, now towards the end of Ochenta, the kinds of projects we were getting was like revise the AI translation, and so that's not as fun anymore.
Yeah. It's still not the same, but it is getting there. And I think that the authenticity of the language can be
Yeah.
replaced yet.
Yeah.
But
I hope, I
that's
hope not.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you can create a whole other company just on this. I want to talk about motherhood and how, well, first meeting your husband. Tell me a little bit about that.
How do I say this? Okay. So I manifested my life in lots of ways. When I say that, I really mean it. And I think this is advice to any person that's listening to you that has a dream. You can really accomplish it in it's like, I don't believe in The Secret or anything like that, but I do believe that if you really want to do something, if you really want something to happen, like put it out into the universe and it will happen. Like that is true. It's also happened with my new ideas and anything that I'm working on. Like I just say, this is what I want to do. And then suddenly the door's open. I don't know what it is. I think it's just a very positive mindset that I've always had because, again, you have no way to go except up because you're already down. If that makes
Right.
sense. Like I came from Queens. I grew up in a poor neighborhood. My parents were immigrants. Like how could I go any further? So yeah. So when I came to France, I had this idea I was going to go become a French journalist and marry a French guy. And that's what happened. And I met my husband 2 weeks into my stay. So I had arrived and I met my husband 2 weeks after I arrived. So when I celebrated my 10 years in France, I celebrated my 10 years with my husband, which is nuts.
That was quick. That's amazing.
It was very quick. It was very fast. I think if like destiny is just destiny, I don't know. Cause I met him on Tinder and like I didn't use that app before in my life. I wanted to learn French from French guys. So I like downloaded it when I arrived like a couple of weeks into being in my master's program. And I deleted it afterwards because like, this is a waste of time. And then a friend of mine was like, come on, try it again. So I tried again the second time, and that second person that I met was my husband. So I deleted it after, and it's been that ever since. And now we have a baby.
Is he from Paris?
He's from a
Yes.
suburb of Paris, which is an important distinction because that means he's not a Parisian jerk.
That's very important. Yes.
It's funny because you don't say that about New Yorkers. Like New Yorkers, are always from, is that person from New York City, like really from New York City, or are they from upstate New York? It's like the kind of
Right.
same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. New Yorkers can be tough with that.
We're snobby. Yes.
Yeah. So he didn't judge your French when you started dating.
And
Yes.
he had already studied in the US too, so like he had English, so we kind of did both. And then I really needed to practice my French, so our entire relationship like kind of flourished in French, which was cool because you kind of all the prejudices that you have in a relationship when you're both from the same culture, because you have the same judgments of everything, same cultural context, the same kind of perceptions of what success means or whatever, totally changed everything because I was learning to see the world through his eyes, and he was also learning to see them through mine. So it was very interesting because it was like a relationship entirely in translation.
Yeah, we can do a whole other podcast on bicultural
On translation.
relationships for
Yeah.
sure. Did you always want to be a mom?
Yes, yes. But I knew that I wanted it to be much later. Like I got married very quickly. I think I was still, I think it was 24, 23, 24. But we waited a long time to have a kid because I wanted us to take advantage of our 20s. I also wanted to enjoy my 20s, but like what was cool is that I got to do all the things that you would do in your 20s, but with my best friend, which was my
Mm,
husband. So we
yeah.
got to have all of the fun adventures and then go and settle down. But
Yeah.
we're already married because, papers.
Right. Yeah. How does that work when you're married in France? Because in the US, it's,
So I
when
was
you
a
get
resident.
married. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was a student resident, and then I got married before my visa expired, and then became a resident married citizen or something like that. It's like a visa
Mm,
d'épouse, and they give you the
mm.
chance to change that kind of annual visa after 4 years of marriage because they, most people separate or whatever, and they want to make sure you're really in it before they give you the chance to become a citizen. So I had to wait a long time before I could even apply for citizenship. So it's very it's similar in the States in the sense that it takes a long time to go from resident to citizen, but I'm just in the process of applying for citizenship now because I've been here more than 10 years. So it's
Yeah.
now I can do it. I can do it. And I
Yeah.
can go to the interview and be like, I have a kid. He's French
Yeah.
already. So let me be French. I don't want to go in the other line anymore. Like, please give me.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
All the lines. Yes. How close are you to becoming a French
And I
citizen?
just submitted my paperwork and at the end of this year of 2025. So I'm just kind of waiting for them to get back to me with the interview date and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's funny because I had never in any of the visa processes had to translate my parents' birth certificates, but
Oh,
they
yeah.
asked me to do that. And I had never seen my father's birth certificate or my mom's. And I read it and it was like, this person, random guy that knew my dad's family, went and declared his birth a year after he was born. And then other people signed this document. I'd never heard of them before. I hadn't heard the name of my great grandparent on, you know what I mean? Like the parents of my parents' parents.
Yeah.
They're on that document because it says, yeah. So I was like, oh, this person's name was Clementine? Clementina? Leonidas? Those people? I've never heard of them before. Because you know your family line, but you don't know everyone's names. And I never met them because they were on my dad's side of the family and they were in Cali and I hadn't been to Cali. And a lot of them had passed or had immigrated by the time I was born. So I never really met that side of my family. So when I saw my dad's thing, I was like, wow, these are their names. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. Learning something new about your family
Yeah.
more and more as you go
Mm-hmm.
along. And with your kid now,
Mm-hmm.
how do you see the language and, you have a bicultural relationship with your kid as well.
Yeah.
How
I
how
think
is that like?
the language question is very political to me because I learned English in school and I have the privilege of speaking perfect English, but I already spoke Spanish. My son doesn't have that bicultural thing. Like here, there's French at home also. So he's going to speak even better French than I speak English, I guess, because he will have a native speaker at home. But he'll also be in French school and he'll be in French country. So French is going to win. And I also know that English is very valuable in the current landscape. It's totally smart to teach him English first, but I don't want to. And it's a weird thing. I had a very strange feeling, but even when I was pregnant, I was asking myself, do I speak English to him or do I speak Spanish? Because my language of love, I will say, is Spanish. Because my mother spoke Spanish to me and my entire life I've heard, te amo, te quiero. It was first that, we say love you, ciao, but it's bilingual kind of. It's not fully English, it's not fully Spanish. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll know when he's born, how I'm going to talk to him. And so I decided on the day he was born, I was going to do Spanish. Because it just came to me I wanted to say corazón, mi alma, alma mia,
Yeah.
I just wanted to, it's just so much sweeter as a language. So I felt like I could represent my love more in Spanish. So yes, I decided, no, we're not going to do the imperial English. We're not going to do the, capitalist, very businessy language first. He's going to learn English regardless in school. And he has a native English speaker at home. And he will be very good
Right.
at English when it comes to that. But I want him to at least have a base of Spanish. So I started Spanish first. And that, yeah, I hope it works. I mean, right now he's, choosing to speak better French, but it's also because he's in this weird phase of now starting to say full words and full sentences.
Mhm.
And I just need to expose him more to Spanish. When we were in Colombia last fall. He was still little, so he wasn't saying so much, but it was so funny. Like his first full sentence was like, "I don't like this." But he said it in French. I was like, interesting. Like the thing that's negative, you say it in French. But when you say like you like something, I wonder. And it's like an interesting language study, but I'm nerdy like that, so I'm always paying attention, you know?
That's so interesting. And it makes sense. Even though I don't speak French, it does make sense. How do you feel as a mother?
It's awesome. It's awesome. I love being a mom. Honestly, I do. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of worrying. I totally understand my mom now better because she was one of those like helicopter moms. Like I understand more. And I also sympathize even more with her because she was a single mother. So I'm doing this with my partner and I have trouble. So I can't even imagine like how hard it was for her. When I went through my postpartum period, my mother came and stayed with me for 3 months, and that was incredible.
Hmm.
And I asked her how her first postpartum period went, and she was like, "I had to go back to work after a month." And
Wow.
yeah, because she was alone and she had to pay rent. So it was heartbreaking to hear that because I had never really thought to ask her, you know? And then I asked her and I was like, she had it so rough. Like I need to be able to, I can manage. I can manage even if it gets hard for me now. It's never going to be as hard as it was for her. So I always think about that anytime it's getting difficult or, my kid is sick all the time or whatever, I can be with him. My mom couldn't be with us when we were sick. She had to go to work. She had no choice. It's different. It's a completely different experience.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
humbles you a lot. It humbles you a lot.
Yeah.
I think Cardi B did like an interview recently and she said the same thing. She was like, my mom had 14 children or something like that.
All right.
And she's about to have 4 kids and she's a single mother. And she's like, what do you mean I'm not going to keep working? Like, I got to hustle. I got 4 babies. Like if her parents could do it with 10 kids in Dominican Republic, like she's going to do it now
Right.
in the US.
Yeah. Oh my
So yeah,
God.
I'm in
14
France. I'm
kids.
going to be the Cardi
Yeah.
B of France.
Yes. You're already becoming that. Last question, Lori. What's next for you? What are you
Yeah.
excited about right now?
Yeah, I'm going into a new project with all the same mission and values of multicultural representation that I had before in Ochenta. It's just not being channeled into content production. It's going to be made primarily to work with women entrepreneurs, cultural daughters of immigrants, immigrants themselves who are creating businesses and need support in developing them. Whether that's like coming up with like a proper like way to present your brand or thinking of new ideas to monetize, networking, partnership development, all these kinds of things. It's really basically applying all the learnings I have from the business world doing Ochenta as like an international business and bringing it to all different kinds of businesses. So I'm already working with a couple of incredible women entrepreneurs in Madrid, in London, in Paris. And it's been really cool because, interestingly, we all have the same challenges of like not feeling like we're worthy almost of like doing that because you don't know anyone in your family who's an entrepreneur probably most of the time. Like
Yeah.
who are you modeling yourself after? Like who can you get advice from? So it's nice to be able to say like, no, there's so many other more of us that are, in the same boat and who had like doubts and who had ups and downs and who had learnings and that we can share them. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. Help share those learnings, kind of pay forward what I was able to do before. I'm launching in March, so a little bit later than what we talked about, but I'm launching in March and I will tell you that the company's name is Maravilla.
Hmm.
And it's based on the name of it is coming from the Colombian flower, which is called the Maravilla flower. And the idea is to grow, my ochenta was a little bird who was flying everywhere, but this is more about like planting seeds and growing. So helping women grow their businesses. And of course it has to be Colombian flower because, you got to
Yeah.
keep the Latinidad there. We got to
Oh,
keep the
yes.
representation.
Yes.
And yeah, no, I mean, no matter where I am, no matter where I
I
go, I'm
love
always going
that.
to be that, So
Yeah.
my perspective is unique. And any woman who's hearing this who is, a daughter of immigrants, your perspective is so unique and it's so valuable in anything that you make, anything that you do. So yeah, don't forget that. Even when it's hard, it's actually the most valuable thing about you. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're such in a great position to do this business. Congrats. Sounds
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you. And yeah, I know I'm honestly right now to do this interview feels really nice. And, this week has been crazy. The week before was crazy in terms of like
Mm.
news. And I've just been sitting
Yep.
with a knot in my chest for the last couple of weeks. So it feels nice to be able to say, there's positive things happening in our community. There's great stories that are happening. Bad Bunny won the Grammy,
Yeah.
We have some
Go ahead.
positive things
Yes.
happening at least.
Yeah.
And, they can't silence us. We can't, we're going to keep on making things. We're going to keep on creating. And yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it feels good to support that kind of thing.
Of course you are. You absolutely are. How can people reach out to you, Lori?
So they can go to my website, and if they're interested, they can, leave a note for me, and then we can set up a call and talk about whatever their dreams are.
Awesome. I might set up one myself. That sounds amazing.
Cool. Yeah. So it's lorimartinez.com for now. I'm not going to create a separate website. It's going to be on my personal site because I'm going to develop it out of my own personal thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank
This was
you.
great.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.
Mwah.
Bye. Besitos.
Bye.
Ciao.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation and find it inspiring. If you did, please share this episode and subscribe to Arrivals. Don't forget to leave a rating. It really helps more people discover these stories. I'll see you in the next episode.